I've got a special guest. I was able to connect through email with Marc Scott Zicree. And Mark is someone, while the name might not immediately be recognizable to you, maybe it is, but you know his work. Mark has, he started out in animation, children's animation, and writing scripts, and graduated to the big times. And I definitely mean big time, big league when we talk about shows like Star Trek, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, a host of, if you're a fan of sci-fi, you have definitely seen this guy's work. He's also got a YouTube channel. We'll probably talk a little bit about that as well, where he is known affectionately as Mr. Sci-Fi. And he's also got one of the coolest backgrounds. I have a crappy virtual background. He's got one of the coolest backgrounds I've ever seen, just in a wonderful, cool library there, and all those great figures. Holy cow, you could spend hours just kind of figuring out what everything is going on there. Happy to have you here, Mark. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Dave. I'm really happy to be here. And just to let you know, I switch it up quite often. So if one studies the background behind me as I'm doing various, you'll see I might focus on Arthur C. Clarke or Heinlein or you name it. You never know what's going to pop up. It's really fun.
That is awesome. And that's half the fun of having all those great things, is just kind of moving them around and shuffling them. I've got over here off screen, I've got a bookshelf with a few cherished knickknacks myself.
Yes.
No point in moving them around, though. I don't have quite the collection you do.
Absolutely.
The first question I have for you, given your extensive resume, and I realize that you could change your answer tomorrow, I'm not going to hold you to it, but right now, as we talk, Mark, is there a favorite TV show that you wrote for?
Well, the one I'm doing right now, Space Command, is the one that's my most favorite because it's the one that I'm writing, producing, directing, creating at my own studio. So that's really fun. But obviously, Far Beyond the Stars on Deep Space Nine, I'm very proud of. The Sliders episodes I did, and I produced the fourth season of that. And then I did a Star Trek New Voyages episode with George Takei and Christina Moses, where I again co-wrote it and directed it and executive produced it. So it's basically, I just love the world of science fiction. Star Trek and Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, the original versions of those, were what made me want to be a writer in the first place. And to be able to not only be inspired by that, but then go on to be mentored by those writers and then go on to make more recent iterations of those shows and work with my heroes. It's a dream come true, and it's still going. I mean, I sold my first short story when I was 19. I was writing the Twilight Zone Companion when I was 21 or 22, and I was writing for television by the time I was 22 or 23 with, Smurfs, He-Man, Super Friends, Real Ghostbusters, and then jumped over to live action with Star Trek The Next Generation and Captain Power and all that stuff. So yeah, really fun.
The rest is history. And I neglected to mention the delightful compendium that you put together in terms of the Twilight Zone Companion. I actually have that book somewhere in my collection, and we moved a couple of years ago, and it still may be in a box, but I have that book. So it's kind of cool that I'm talking to the individual that's responsible for putting that together.
Well, it's funny because I just did the third edition, the new edition of the book, and I added 100 pages of material and 500 new photos and links to audio and video rarities. Because when I finished the book, it came out initially in 1982, so many people kept telling me stories about the Twilight Zone or about Rod Serling. I wanted to update it, but also stuff that you had to go to a university archive to watch on a 16 millimeter print on a moviola back when I started the book, and when I started writing it in 77. Now you can just go onto the internet, to YouTube or whatever, and it's right there. I mean, Carol for Another Christmas, which was a Rod Serling Christmas special that he wrote in 1964, that again, before this, you wouldn't be able to see it anywhere. It's on HBO as a Christmas special this year, and that's from 1964. I mean, amazing. So I wanted people to have access to all the cool stuff that I got to check out when I was, writing the book initially.
I never imagined the amount of information that would be available to us now. And I think it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. I think sometimes there's so much coming at us that it's hard to focus on just a thing.
Yeah, well, I just wrote a new book called Greenlighting Yourself that's coming out in the next few months, and it's about how you can have a career as a writer, director, actor, producer without the studios or networks
Yeah.
having to wave their magic wand. So basically liberate people. But one of the chapters I have is having a life. Because
Yeah.
in addition to because as you say, we're so inundated by content that it's important to remember, hey, you can have friends, you can have a wife, you can have kids, you can have a dog, you can, travel to real places. And it's not to say that we shouldn't be watching movies and TV, of course, or reading books, but you also want to make sure that you're taking a breath and kind of, stepping out of virtual reality into real reality every now and then.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like an exciting book. I'll have to check that one out as well.
It was fun.
Might be helpful for me as I try to grow my little YouTube channel.
Yes.
I know you were aware of this because I saw a video on YouTube, but I thought I had a real nugget, a great question to ask you. But I know you already know about this, but you are aware, right, that you had a supervillain named after you in the Super Friends.
Yes. And there's also a character named after me, I think, in one of the Star Trek novels. Because I came up in TV and in books with a group of I was in my 20s and so forth, early 20s, and we were all a group of people writing for many of the same shows, writing books at the same time. And so my friend Michael Reeves and I both were writing for Super Friends. Michael's the writer who brought me into television initially. I met him, he was a teaching assistant in Theodore Sturgeon's writing class at UCLA. So I took that class. Ted became a friend and mentor, and Michael Reeves became a very dear friend. And so, he named a villain after me. And that's terrific. Of course, Zicree the Kryptonian. And I think every now and then I would give a little tip of the hat to some of my friends. And now in Space Command, I name all the Space Command personnel after classic science fiction writers. So we've got Cadet Bradbury and Lieutenant Sturgeon and on, because my thought is that all these great science fiction writers that I grew up reading, if there's an Easter egg in Space Command that leads someone out of curiosity to check out the writing of these terrific writers, Clifford D. Simak and so forth, all the better. So I'm continuing the tradition.
Love it. Totally agree. And I think that's just a fun little Easter egg.
Yes.
I was unaware of the Star Trek. So you have a Star Trek character named after you as well?
I think Mel Gilden, my friend Mel Gilden, who was also writing Smurfs and other shows, I think he put me in as like a Lieutenant Zicree or somebody. I'm in a Star Trek novel he wrote, and I think Barbara Hambly put me in as a character in one of her novels, one of her fantasy novels or horror novels. So yeah, because we all used to hang out. We used to have something called the Rubber Ears Club, where we'd meet like once a month, and it was all the Star Trek writers. So it was like, but both television writers and novelists. So Barbara Hambly was in it, Vonda McIntyre was in it, Mel Gilden,
wow,
Garfield and Judith Reeves Stevens. So it was like, and it was the Rubber Ears Club because of Spock, the Rubber Ears Club, and so we were all very much, it was almost like a party that was ongoing, and so and we were just loving what we were able to write for the different, because all of us had grown up with Star Trek, and so it's super fun to be able to write in those universes.
That is very, very cool. Now I happened to notice as I was watching Space Command, the first hour, which is on YouTube. I will post a link, by the way, to Mark's channel if I haven't already said that. But I'm also going to post a link to the first hour of Space Command.
Yeah.
Is that you in the first? The cool, the guy that makes the comment, something like "Hey, cool" or something.
Yes. Yeah. My line is "Wow." Because it's an amazing crash landing that I witnessed. I'm in a spacesuit. I'm by a terraforming station on Mars.
Right.
And the story with that is when I was 12 years old, there was a company called the Western Costume, and it was the big costume company that rented costumes to all of the Hollywood studios. They were not open to the public. And one day when I was 12, they had a sale that was open to the public. And my mother took me, and there was a real spacesuit there. And it had been used in Twilight Zone, it had been used in a lot of things, but it was an actual Navy high altitude suit, the helmet, the suit, the boots, everything. And my mom bought it for me for $25, which is astonishing. It'd be worth thousands now. And so I figured that I should have, like Hitchcock had his cameos, I would have my cameo where I'd be in my spacesuit and I would say wow as I watch our hero crash land a spaceship. And the funny part was that later on we were shooting a, a battle on Titan between combat synthetic humans,
Right.
basically
Yeah.
replicants, and human freedom fighters. And the day that we were shooting it, one of the people didn't show up, and all the humans would wear spacesuits. The combat synthetics, not needing to breathe, wouldn't have to have spacesuits. But someone didn't show up, and I said, "Well, I'll put on a spacesuit, and I'll say, but the requirement is I have to be blown up. I have to be hit by a laser and go ah." So then I was approached by an anthology to write a short story, sort of set in the Space Command universe. And I had the idea that it'd be very funny to link those two cameos as though it was one character, and then end with it having us, because we end a certain part of the story where we're seeing a statue of our hero, Captain Kemmer. And I thought it'd be very funny if in the statue garden just behind him, you'd see a statue of me as that character. I wrote a short story called Grizzled Space Jockey. And it's actually on Mr. Sci-Fi. You can actually, I read the entire short story on Mr. Sci-Fi, so you can actually check it out.
I'll have
But
to check it out.
that was really, really fun. And I'm sure I'll continue that tradition of
Yeah.
having cameos.
I thought that was you. I thought that, yeah, he's having his Hitchcock moment right there. That's
Yes.
awesome. Love it. So I've got in my community on my YouTube channel, I've got a handful of comic book fans such as myself. So given that you did write for the Super Friends, I've got to pin you down. DC or Marvel?
For me, it was DC.
Me too. Grew up with DC comics. Loved.
Because Marvel never ended its stories. They just kept going.
Yeah,
and going,
yeah.
going, and it drove me crazy as a kid.
Yeah, and there was something about that. Just the Superman and Batman for me. Obviously, I love the Justice League and
Green Lantern.
that kind of, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, all of them. The Flash. So, favorite comic book character? Do you have one?
Yes, I do actually. Interesting enough, my favorite comic book is Magnus Robot Fighter, as drawn by Russ Manning. It was a Gold Key comic, and it's just.
I remember it. Yeah, that was.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was that Gold Key Comics.
Yeah.
I got them in 3-packs back in the 70s. There would be like a Star Trek issue, a Twilight Zone issue, and like something else, like a Magnus Robot Fighter.
Yeah. But I have the entire run, the original run of Magnus, and I just loved it. When Russ Manning stopped doing it, it became totally awful. But for that brief period, and they had painted covers of their heroes, which were very dramatic and cool looking. And I just love that. I mean, obviously, I was collecting as a kid. I was collecting a lot of comics. And when they announced that they were going to do a comic book that was a race between Superman and the Flash, I actually drew at about age 8. I drew my own comic book of the Flash racing Superman before the issue came out. And I remember the last illustration was the two of them running at super speed, and both of them having the same thought balloon, which is, I hope I win.
So I remember that because that was in a big oversized DC comic book that they sold. They were selling those in the 70s, these oversized comics that if you didn't have a really good comic book shop, you had to order away for them. I didn't ever get that issue. Who won? Do you recall?
I don't remember. That's funny. I think it was the Flash, but I really can't be held to that. I think they had a rematch also. But I must say that all of us who were writing cartoons, we grew up reading and loving comics. And so for me, writing Superman, writing the Green Lantern, all these great characters for Super Friends was just a thrill. It was something I never expected to do. I didn't intend to be a writer for animation. My goal was to be a writer producer doing things like Star Trek. And but when Michael Reeves invited me into television to write for the cartoons, the animation, I saw that was my way in. And I learned my craft. It was a very good training ground, and I'm really glad that I got to be there during that sort of strange golden age of 70s, 80s animation. It was a lot of fun.
A really wonderful time. You've done so much.
Yeah.
And I hate to pin you down on one thing, but I've got Mr. Sci-Fi with me right here. So what accomplishment are you, most proud of?
Well, I'm very lucky because my heroes were not one-hit wonders. They were guys who were creating a consistent, amazing body of work. Rod Serling, Ray Bradbury, those, Harlan Ellison. These were amazing, amazing talents who you could say, okay, with Ray, for instance, who became a dear friend in the later years of his life, you could say, okay, we've got the Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, Something Wicked This Way Comes, the astonishing breadth of his short stories, or Gene Roddenberry, or any of these people. It was like, so for me, having a career that starts with the Twilight Zone Companion,
Yeah.
and now, some 40 years later or so, I have my own studio, and I'm making 6 series now with, I have the first one of Space Command, but I'm also doing something called the Showrunners Network, where I'm creating 5 more series with the creators of The Expanse, Farscape, Defiance, on, and a new Rod Serling series. I'm just really thrilled at the entire body of work. I'm very honored and very lucky, and I think I've pulled many a rabbit out of a hat one way or another.
Rod Serling. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, my community loves the Twilight Zone, and
Yeah.
of course, yeah, even Night Gallery. It was less hands-on, but he wrote some of the scripts for Night Gallery. Speaking of Rod Serling, you say there's a new project. You
Yes.
teased a little bit. Can you share a little bit more? How much can you share
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
Because
I
they're
can.
going to love hearing about it.
Sure, and it's something that I'm in negotiations now with the Serling family and their representative. But of course, I've known Jody and Ann Serling, Rod's 2 daughters, since I was in my early 20s. So like we've had this amazing journey of our lives, together. And I just saw them. I was the guest of honor at the Serling Fest in Rod's hometown of Binghamton, and got to have meals with both of them. And I've been talking extensively with the agents as well, who I've also known for many decades. So the basic idea was this. It's called Rod Serling's After Twilight. And Rod dictated everything he wrote from 1957 on. So scripts, letters, speeches, everything. He would lounge by the pool in the morning and just dictate into a recorder, and then his secretary Marge would type it up, and that's how he did things. And then he'd make hand corrections. So it was thought that all of these recordings were lost, and they recently found 1,000 of them.
Wow.
And so my idea was to take Serling scripts that either hadn't been seen since the live days of TV or hadn't been made ever, and shoot some of these scripts with Rod narrating it from that lost material.
Oh, wow.
And so Rod would actually be the narrator, as well as, and we'll have scripts by other people as well, Matheson, Beaumont, George Clayton Johnson, maybe some of the new crop like Neil Gaiman, or, whomever. But it would be a new show that really pays attention to what a giant of television writing Rod Serling was. And so we'll see if this ends up getting made, but I'm planning on doing it, absolutely, and it's looking very encouraging. I've also brought aboard a producer on that show, an executive producer named Joseph Dougherty, who for 7 years he was the executive producer on Pretty Little Liars. He won an Emmy for 30 something. He's been on Judging Amy and many, 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 many shows. So he's an old pal. And but it's, and also there's a script when they brought Twilight Zone back in the 80s. I wrote a script for them called Knife Through the Veil. It was gonna be directed by Douglas Hayes, who did Eye of the Beholder and The Howling Man and The Invaders and The After Hours. Great director on the original Twilight Zone. And a week before prep, the censors pulled the plug on the script. They said it was too hard-edged. Now it's not hard-edged at
No.
all. Wonderful little Twilight Zone script. So that's another one we'd be shooting as well. And but it's just, I've got my own studio. I mean, a physical studio. We have spaceship sets, and we're building 2 8-foot-tall creatures, and we've got 15 spacesuits from various productions. And, it's just, I'm a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
It's Christmas every day. I have no complaints.
What a life. What a life. So let me ask you one more question. Maybe we've already talked about it. If you can elaborate or share something, what's something else? I always like to ask, Ian, what's something cool that you can tell us or share with us right now?
Well, it's really fun to discover things about science fiction that nobody knows about. And, it was funny because when I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, I was up in Rod Serling's attic, and I discovered there's an unmarked box. This was because I started writing the book 2 years after Rod's death. Everything was exactly as he'd left it in his house in Pacific Palisades. Even his dog was still there. And And so I was up in his attic where the scrapbooks were, these big leather volumes of clippings, and there was a box, an unmarked box, and I opened it, and there were scripts for Twilight Zone that had never been made. There were scripts by Matheson, Beaumont, and there were 2 scripts by Ray Bradbury. And there was a note, a handwritten note on top of one of the scripts from Ray Bradbury to Rod saying, "Dear Rod, this is the first of what will be many scripts. I look forward to a very, very fruitful collaboration." And yet Ray Bradbury was only credited with 1 Twilight Zone episode, I Sing the Body Electric. And yet 3 of his proteges made up the core of Rod Serling's writers on the show: Matheson, Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, and George Clayton Johnson. So clearly something had gone awry. And as I was doing the interviews for the book, William F. Nolan and some others were telling me that there had been a break between Rod Serling and Ray Bradbury, but neither of them ever talked about it publicly. So I wrote to Ray Bradbury to interview him when I was, doing the book and in my early 20s. And he wrote me back a letter basically saying he didn't want to talk about Twilight Zone, that his work was the work he'd done would stand, and that was all the comment he wanted to have. So I thought, well, okay, I won't find out about this. So decades later, Ray Bradbury came across something that I'd written that he really loved, and he called me and he said, "You must come to the house." Now, knowing that he had the Twilight Zone was kind of a bitter pill for him, I didn't even mention I'd written the Twilight Zone Companion. So we just were friends, and about once a month I'd go over to his house for over a decade, and we just talk about life and career and all this stuff. And finally, I got to a point of comfort with Ray that I fessed up. I said, "I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, and I know there was a break between you and Rod. So would you tell me what it was?" And he told me. And so on Mr. Sci-Fi, I basically told the story that Ray told me of how their friendship had disintegrated. And it takes 30 minutes to tell it. So if you go to Mr. Sci-Fi and type in Ray Bradbury, you'll be able to hear this amazing story. But it was like no one had ever been told this story. In other words, there was nowhere you could go in public to find out the details. And it was just amazing. And I was very glad that just through the winds of chance, Ray and I became friends where he felt comfortable telling me that story. And but that was sort of the missing piece when I did the book. And so that was really cool. And and then meantime, I just kind of I've gotten to know so many of my heroes, and I'm continuing to do so. On Sweet Haven, the project I'm doing with Rockneil Bannon, who created Farscape and Defiance and Alien Nation and Cult, and is currently the executive producer of Evil on CBS. We've lined up this amazing cast of many of my heroes. So it's Robert Picardo, Gates McFadden, Barbara Bain,
Wow.
Veronica Cartwright, Michael Harney from Orange is the New Black and Project Blue Book.
He was in the first episode of Space Command, wasn't he? I thought I saw Harney in there.
He plays our hero's father.
And Picardo was in it as well.
Bob Picardo was as well. Yeah. And so it's just this amazing cast. And James Hong from Blade Runner is in it. And and so to be able to call Bill Mumy and say, "Hey, I need an actress. Is there someone you'd like to recommend?" He said, "Well, how about Veronica Cartwright? I'm a huge fan of Alien and the Birds and the Phil Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. She's great." Yeah. And this is a project where it's bioengineered disease kills everyone in the world under 60, and so the people 60 and above have to figure out how to save humanity when they can't reproduce. So so it's a really fun project. So we've written Rock and I laid out the show and the pilot, and then Elaine, my wife, and I wrote the pilot script, and we've had 2 table reads so far with our cast via Zoom during the pandemic, and then in the near future, probably at the top of the year, we'll start shooting the pilot. So
very cool. You teased us on the Serling story with Ray Bradbury. Again, I'm going to remind everybody, because I know that you're probably as curious as I am as to what happened there. Yeah. That in the description for this video, this interview with Marc, I've got a link to his website. I'll link directly to that particular video so you guys can click on it. I'll make it easy for you. And I'm also linking to the first hour of Space Command so you guys can all see that, because it's really, really cool.
Thanks. We're about to put out the second hour.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm excited to see it.
yeah, we're cranking on it. There's in the first 2 hours of Space Command, there's 1,800 visual effects shots, which is insane.
Yeah.
Uh, but we've shot 5 hours of the show, and we've done a prequel, and we've also done Grizzled Space Jockey, that short story. But we're rocking and rolling. It's really fun.
You're a busy man, my friend.
Yes.
A busy man. Thank you so much for visiting with me today and allowing me to interview and basically allowing my YouTube community to get to know you. Folks, I encourage you to head on over to Mr. Sci-Fi and check out his channel because it is really cool. It's full of all sorts of great stories and all sorts of fun things. And plus, it's going to get you excited about Space Command, the stuff that Mark's doing there.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. I've had a great time talking with you. And one thing I wanted to say, which is so obvious, is that I love podcasts. I love YouTube and all of these opportunities because clearly we're doing it for the love of it. You
Right.
know, no cynicism. It's entirely because we are just bedazzled by all these wonders that we've encountered in TV shows and movies and books. And comics, of course. So thank you for being a kindred spirit as well.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks again for reaching out. And I like to call all that stuff the good stuff. That's really what it is. It's the sweet part of life, my friend.
Yes.
Thank you for being one of those that creates that stuff and shares it with all of us.
Yes. Well, I'll leave you with one final thing based on what you just said, which is, you know, my friend and mentor Theodore Sturgeon created what was called Sturgeon's Law. Sturgeon's Law is 90% of everything is crap. So when I wrote not long ago, I wrote a book with Guillermo del Toro, and I mentioned this to him, and Guillermo said, well, I'll counter that with del Toro's law, which is the 10% of everything is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. That's the good stuff.
Yeah. So great. Well, you take care, and
Thanks so much, Mark.
Soon. Yeah, take care.
You have a good one.
Thanks.